Considering how difficult it is to carry games as an ADC, it's a real shame that a ton of low elo players are held back even further by ignoring some minor details. Tons of ADC players are experiencing difficult matches simply because of a few basic mistakes that are holding them back from having much more impact in their games. In this guide, we'll be covering 5 of the biggest problems that you may be encountering and what you need to do in order to fix them. Let's get right into it. The first critical mistake we want to cover is how so many ADC players tend to immediately freak out when someone on the enemy team is fed and begin building defensively. For example, let's take a look at this game. On the scoreboard, you'll notice that the enemy Evelynn is quite fed and likely to make a very healthy snack out of our poor Lucian for most of the game. After a second encounter with Evelynn leading to an eventual death, Lucian has had enough of how fed the enemy Evelynn has gotten off his teammates. While dead, he opts into buying a null magic mantle, but moments later, he feels as if that probably won't be enough and commits to upgrading it all the way to QSS, as it has a lot of value against the enemy Malzahar as well. And that's precisely the poor mindset we wish to address. So many ADCs will immediately turn towards defensive itemization and make themselves even more useless than they already are against fed opponents. Surely everyone here has heard the phrase, the best offense is a good defense, and the best defense is a good offense, right? Well, this applies to League just as well as in any other strategy game. When you're ahead of the curve and actually dominating the map, then defensive items work very well to keep you on the offensive. If you have more defensive stats, it's harder to take you down, which makes it less likely that any mistakes you make actually result in any meaningful throw. On the flip side, if you're behind, you can't afford to waste gold on defensive stats. When you're behind, you need to be able to capitalize on your opponent's mistakes. If you don't deal enough damage, then you can't actually punish your opponents as much as you should be able to. Malzahar mispositioning like this could easily be the start of a throw by the enemy team, if Lucian dealt more damage and could actually punish him. Without meaningful amounts of damage, it doesn't matter that your opponents deal slightly less damage to you anyway. They'll just keep chasing you down and eventually kill you since you're not a threat. And as an extra side note, you'll be even less useful against enemy champions who you didn't itemize against, since you still take tons of damage from them and deal no damage back. Now, don't get us wrong, we're not saying that if Lucian had bought damage that he'd win the game here. When your team feeds an Evelynn that hard, the game is probably over for you as an ADC. That being said, the only thing an ADC offers their team is damage. When your opponents are fed and you're behind, you'll need to rely on mistakes and positioning well to carry. A weak defensive item will never win you the game, whereas having the damage to punish enemy mistakes can allow you to try and maybe come back. Before we get into the next low elo mistake, we quickly wanted to remind you that this is just one of nearly 2,000 premium guides you'll find over at the best place to improve at League of Legends, SkillCapped. Be sure to learn more at the end of the guide. The next mistake is one that makes us question the logic that a lot of people have towards the game. By far, one of the biggest complaints that you'll often hear from the player base on social media is how snowball-y League is. One team gets a lead and the game feels completely over. And yet, time and time again, teams will absolutely troll for Dragon, an objective which does literally nothing until way into the mid and late stages of the game. As an ADC, you need to get rid of the Dragon Madness mindset ASAP. The early stage of the game is way too important to ever mess up for an early Dragon. Take a look at this example. So far, the game is going fairly well for Ezreal and his Morgana. Ezreal is about even on CS versus the Lucian, but up a kill, which puts him slightly ahead. But Ezreal's Amumu calls to initiate the Dragon. Take a mental note here. Ezreal is conceding a good base timing to go help at the objective. They manage to secure it for free and even snag a kill on the enemy jungler afterwards on top of that. Unfortunately though, Lucian is sitting on a pretty nice buy, freshly coming off a recall, whereas our dear Ezreal hasn't based to purchase any items yet with all his gold. Back in the lane, it's just complete dominance from the enemy Lucian, even while Amumu is here to offer assistance. Now, is this entirely because Ezreal hasn't based? No, they're obviously misplaying a bit, but it definitely doesn't help that he's sitting on a lot of unspent gold from missing his earlier base timing. Using that brief moment of dominance by pushing Ezreal out of lane at a bad time, Lucian managed to convert that into a meaningful CS advantage of nearly 40. He then uses that power to instantly obliterate Morgana during a 2v2, which puts him in complete control of the lane and in a winning position. Not only that, but the irony of the whole situation is that the earlier Dragon Ezreal and his team acquired is completely pointless now. Due to Lucian's lane control, the red team are now the ones in control over the objective, so they can't even continue stacking them after having acquired the first. Let's make this point very clear. The outcome of the game is very often decided by who wins the laning phase. Do not, under any circumstance, put yourself at a disadvantage by helping your jungler with a bad early dragon call. If they want to int over the objective, let them go ahead. As an ADC, you already lack so much agency for how things will turn out in the early game. Don't concede one of the few things you do have control over. For our third mistake, we have to address the overgrouping that occurs from low elo ADC players. Look, we know it feels natural and safe to group with your teammates during the mid-game. You never know when a fight is going to break out, and you need to be there for it, right? Actually, that's precisely the problem. You have no idea when anything in the game is going to happen. There might be a fight, there might not. You can't live your game life worrying about something that you can't control. What you can control, though, is locating sources of farm for yourself. Your teammates are going to inevitably group around you in mid all the time, and you need to move around the map to find lanes where you can farm alone without sharing resources. In this case, Caitlyn had a decent option of pathing towards top to acquire some solo farm. Instead, she chases after her team, in case they potentially get into a fight over absolutely no objective. And she hopes that she's here in case she maybe ends up potentially contributing some value to the fight that may or may not have occurred. This mindset is the major reason why you'll see ADC players have such low CS numbers in low elo, when as a role, they should have the highest CS numbers in the game, since they're supposed to farm the most due to their high DPS. Caitlyn following her team around the whole game is well on her way to a measly 5 CS per minute average. This is by far one of the biggest issues low elo ADCs suffer from. Marksman players tend to farm just fine during most of the laning phase, but the second the mid game rolls around, their CS averages tend to drop drastically, since they just stand around with their teams the whole time. If there's no immediate objective to fight over, then you need to learn how to leave your team alone and farm solo. And if you're scared that you'll mess up and die in a side lane or that your team will lose a fight while you farm waves, don't worry, we've got a ton of guides on how to get better at that. But to get better, you need to start playing on your own more often. Take that first step, and we can help you with the rest on our other guides. Our fourth tip is closely related to the third, and it's how most low elo ADCs do not prioritize farming jungle camps nearly as much as they should. Always remember that the main reason you pick ADC is their massive DPS. Well, that extends to minions and monsters as well. You absolutely shred jungle camps once you get an item or two. And yet, we consistently see ADC players not take free jungle camps that are right next to them all the time. Just watch Tristana casually walk past the Raptors on her way to red, when it would have taken her literally 2 seconds to kill the camp with her E. It's not like her jungler was around, and at this point in the game, it's more than acceptable to take their spare camps. Let's fast forward things a little bit. Right after Tristana and her team win the fight for the Mountain Soul and Tristana gets bot tower, she retreats towards safety in order to get off her recall. As she does this, she doesn't even consider taking 5 seconds to go to the Krug camp, which gives around half a kill worth of golden experience. Considering just how crazy people will go to chase down kills, it is insane that ADC players do not take brief moments to kill any jungle camps that are near them. Overgrouping and ignoring camps is the biggest reason why low elo ADCs never match the CS averages of higher elo players. You should be combining these two things to really accelerate your CS. As you move around the map to isolated lanes in order to solo farm, you should be taking camps on your way there. If you start doing this more, you'll find that your CS per minute is going to skyrocket and you'll be carrying much more often. The final mistake we'll be covering is a quick one. Something we see all too often from ADCs is them pushing for level 2 way too fast. We make plenty of guides as to how important the level 2 spike is in bot lane, but the problem is that players aren't utilizing it nearly as effectively as they should be. More often than not, they're over pushing the wave and allowing their opponents to freely farm and catch back up in levels near the safety of their tower. So let's take a look at the problem more closely. Notice how quickly the first wave is being pushed by Ashe. Of course, Leona had a hand in that as well, but a lot of it was Ashe's W and auto spamming. The consequence of this is the wave ends up being very close to Ezreal and Alistar's tower. This makes it impossible for Ashe's Leona to get absolutely anything done, which means that the entire point of rushing level 2 is completely null and void. Your opponents are going to hit level 2 back very quickly, so this brief timing window needs to be utilized well. It's actually funny, we found an example of low elo players pulling this off properly, but probably because their opponent was actually AFK though. Still, have to give credit where credit is due. Lucian and Thresh build a minor wave advantage, but then completely stop hitting the wave except the last hit. This is actually proper technique. At this point, many players are tempted to kill these two melee minions as quickly as possible to hit level 2, but that accomplishes nothing. If you do that, then your opponents are going to back off to their tower, and the wave is just going to quickly crash anyways, giving you no time to punish with your level 2 lead. But by slowing down the push, you're still guaranteed a level 2 lead, but the wave is in the middle of the lane longer. Once Aphelios came back from being AFK, Thresh had plenty of time to look for an engage to punish him. This is exactly what a good level 2 punish should look like, even if it didn't actually result in a kill. If you want to understand this timing window even better and how to guarantee a lead off it every single time, then you should definitely check out this guide, which we made specifically for that purpose. We go much deeper into things there, but we just wanted to make you aware that this is likely something some of you may do and how much pressure it's likely costing you. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $4.99 a month if you are serious about improving. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this one. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time. Cheers!